All right, good evening, everyone. You should see the Jefferson Street Redevelopment District page on your screens. If not, please shoot me a chat message to say you don't. We're doing a hybrid meeting tonight. We're at the Pleasant Green Baptist Church on Jefferson Street. I'd like to thank Pastor Jackson for allowing us to use this space so that we can have a hybrid meeting to include more people as we go through the review process of the Jefferson Street Redevelopment District. Throughout the presentation, we'll have questions on an app called Menti. So if you like, you can go to menti.com and answer those questions as we progress. You can also put feedback in the chat and we will download those as part of our note-keeping process. Oh, and I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Shara Taylor. I am an urban development specialist at MDHA. Our agenda for tonight is to discuss the redevelopment plan objectives, to discuss tax increment financing, better known as TIF, to share the existing TIF project we have, and to get your feedback on what our potential TIF priorities should be going forward. And again, we have the interactive activity Menti. It's menti.com, and you can put in the code at the top of your screen, 8909. 9685, and you'll be able to vote as we move along. So for those of you who are using Menti, we're going to do a couple test questions to get you acclimated. The first one is, how did you hear about this meeting? Did you receive the direct mail postcard we sent out? Did you receive an email? Did you see it on our website? Or did you hear about word of mouth? Or did you hear about it some other way? Just let us know so that we can know the best way to reach out to people going forward. And I'll give you a minute or two to get to Menti and put in the code and vote. And you can also put it in the chat if that's more comfortable for you.
Oh, I received the card.
That card, okay, good.
I got the card.
Yeah. We mailed everybody in the area to do that, and if we get the redevelopment district is really just the front.
Yeah, it's very narrow.
So it's a narrower area. We just got commercial area district, we can expand it to single family neighborhoods.
So the people in the meeting say that they received the direct mail we sent out. So we'll forego the Menti questions for now, and we'll just move through the presentation. We'll start with a little bit of background on the Jefferson Street Redevelopment District. It was established in 2005 and is scheduled to end in 2035. When the district started, the appraised property value was $17.7 million. And as of now, it's $61.7 million, which is in line with all of the property values across Nashville increasing. This is a more detailed map of Jefferson Street. It starts at the interstate to the east and goes out to TSU to the west. And it's very tightly close to the Jefferson Street corridor. We don't go deep into the neighborhood. And within the redevelopment plan, one of the things we can do is determine which land uses are allowable in the district. And I'll just highlight a few of these so you have an idea of what is able to be done along Jefferson Street. We can have single family, two family, and multifamily dwellings. We allow hotels and motels. We allow churches. We also allow schools, offices, and general retail. But that retail cannot have liquor sales or adult-oriented businesses. We also allow theaters, cultural facilities, and parks. These are, now I'm getting into the objectives of the redevelopment plan. We have a few objectives, like several objectives to address what in 2005 we saw as needing to happen along Jefferson Street. And this went through a community process back then. And now we're coming to update, hopefully update the plan based on your feedback. Objective A is harmonious land use patterns. And you can think of that as the buildings are Legos and you're trying to figure out if they fit together. Does this Lego go here? Does this go here? Or does it look out of place? So think about whether or not when you're driving down Jefferson Street or walking down Jefferson Street, do the buildings feel like they fit together? Yes.
Someone is calling and says there's 4 people on this waiting.
Get into the Zoom, just a minute. We have somebody trying to log into our Zoom. Did they go to our website?
They said they used the link.
It's just going to our website and going down to latest news. And then the link is there. Just a minute, folks. We're trying to make sure somebody can get in on the Zoom. They're having a hard time logging in.
Okay. All right. So they're using the link that you share. So I don't know if that's changed something.
It hasn't changed.
Okay.
Tell them to go to nashville-mbha.org.
So they're trying to do Philip Jackson.
Oh, that was 2 nights ago.
This is for Jefferson Street. Yes. Okay. I think we probably access it on the links the book checks, but we can get to the Jefferson Street meeting by navigating to the website, so mbha.org, clicking on latest news.
Yes, ma'am. We'll post the presentation online. We'll put it online. Hopefully by the end of this week, if not by next week. We have to work with our communications team on that. So it'll be, you go to our main website, you go to urban development, and then to redevelopment districts. And then it'll be a link under that. And I'll email it out too. I'll have my contact info so you can contact me and send me your contact information. I think I have some in my purse. I have to look. All right, I think Matt has that. All right, we'll get back to the presentation. Sorry about that. Objective B of the redevelopment plan is redevelopment of the project area. So we make sure that everything that happens along Jefferson Street actually fits within the goals and objectives of the plan. We're gonna skip the Menti questions for now. Objective C is to eliminate substandard property. So when you drive down Jefferson Street, you'll probably notice some buildings that need a little bit of TLC. And we're hoping that through our plan, we can help those buildings develop better curb appeal for people along Jefferson Street. No, ma'am, not yet. She asked how we do that. Objective D is to provide for clear and provide for redevelopment. And so if the land intensity needs to change, that's a possibility. It's difficult along Jefferson Street because the parcels are so narrow, but that is in the plan if it's needed. Objective E is to assure future stability, and we do this through a number of ways. At MDHA, we have the Design Review Committee, which meets twice a month, and they review any plans to exterior portions of buildings. And the Design Review Committee compares that against the plan to see if it actually fits with the plan. We have the land use plan, which disallows certain uses from coming in, including alcohol sales as well as adult entertainment. And we have general design guidelines. And what that does, it says we need you to use high quality materials. So in 5 years, these buildings are not falling down all around us.
So may I ask the question?
Yes.
Does MDHA work in conjunction with codes or how? does that
We do work in conjunction with codes. So the way that process works is the developer will pull a permit, and attached to that permit is the fact that it's in a redevelopment district, and that'll kick it over to Parker Brown, who is our redevelopment district manager. And he'll go in and determine whether or not the developer needs to come before the design review committee. So we have them, when they come in, they bring in site plans, they bring in renderings, they bring in materials so that we know exactly what they're intending to do with that property. That's how long the plan lasts. This is a 30-year plan. Oh, there's no, well, the plan started in 2005. Okay, but we don't actively have any developments happening from MDHA. That'll be on the individual developers. And then Metro Planning has the Nashville Next plan, which is how they guide, or what guides them in how to develop the different communities around Nashville. Objective F is to provide for relocation if that becomes necessary. Objective G is to eliminate and prevent blight. And this plan was written in 2005. Some of the language in the plan is no longer language we use, but it's still written in the plan. And again, we do this through the design review committee, the general design guidelines, and the land use plan. Objective H is to eliminate the vacant lots, which there are a few vacant lots along Jefferson Street. We'd like to have a cohesive development occurring along Jefferson Street. And when you have vacant lots, kind of breaks the flow of the street. Objective I is to revitalize commercial uses. Obviously, Jefferson Street is a commercial corridor, so we would like to have as many bustling commercial uses as possible along Jefferson Street. That's another Mentee question. Objective J is a new public improvement, which includes infrastructure, sidewalks, lighting, anything that makes the area work better physically. We allow for that in the plan. Enhanced preservation goals. Jefferson Street is a very historic area, and we want to make sure we maintain the character of Jefferson Street even as it revitalizes in the future. These are more Mentee questions. And now I'm going to bring up my coworker, Matt Loftus, who is the Assistant Director of Urban Development, to talk about tax increment financing.
Good evening, everyone, virtually and in person. Thanks for showing up tonight, and hopefully the individuals that were navigated onto the incorrect presentation will be able to find their way here. I'm not sure, you can even go there and see if everything's still working. So Shara just talked about, a little overview of the redevelopment district, as well as the objectives. Those objectives are laid out in the redevelopment plan, and she said was created in 2005. So it's been in place for a while now. One of the biggest tools that we have at MDHA, and it's a critical tool that we have just for the city of Nashville in general, and it's something that a lot of cities use across the United States is tax increment financing, which is also known as TIF. So TIF is it's a public financing tool that allows MDHA to use the future growth in property taxes to pay for current improvements. And so it's based on the notion that the upfront investment in an area by a public agency or government will increase the value in that area. So if we invest in an area, that area will increase in value, and we can essentially pay the future growth in property taxes will pay for the upfront investment. And so in Nashville, MDHA can only use TIF within areas that are designated as redevelopment districts. So this Jefferson Street corridor is one of those such areas in which this financing tool is available. So some of the considerations for a project to receive TIF is that the first thing is that the project must represent a significant contribution to the goals or the objectives of the district. And those objectives are what Shara just went over. So it has to start, it has to check some of those boxes, hit some of those things that we're hoping to achieve. And the other one that we look for is whether the proposed development will further stimulate or catalyze additional development or additional growth in the area. And once that TIF loan is repaid, once the initial investment is repaid, then 100% of the future property tax from that area just goes right back into the Metro General Fund. MDHA historically, we've used TIF in just two ways. The first one, and by far, is when MDHA uses TIF and investment in one single parcel, one single project. This would usually be an example where a property owner may reach out to us about helping subsidize a development they're working on, and we would use financing to help subsidize that up front. It would be constructed, and then we would use the property taxes from that site to pay back our initial investment. The other one is the other way that we can use TIF is an expenditure for an area-wide public purpose. So this would be generally infrastructure improvements or public parks or open space or plaza. This is something that would improve the value of a bunch of nearby parcels and not just one. But overall, the public benefit needs to be in accordance with the redevelopment plan. And so the amount of TIF assistance that can be available to any particular development is restricted by the amount of property tax growth that we project will be available in the future. And also what the eligible uses of TIF allow. So we can only spend TIF money on certain things, and those things are identified and are provided to us through state statute. And Jefferson Street right now, as of today, has just a touch over $14 million available for this incentive that basically needs to be used by 2035.
How much was the original?
So it was 15. So we
I think it started with 5, we increased to 15.
okay. Yeah, and so we've essentially, we'll get to it in a second, but we've essentially invested in one project. So it's we'll jump to it here. This is the 1821 Jefferson Street. So the eligible uses of TIF. So if we grant TIF to someone, offer TIF to somebody, they could use it to clear or remediate the land. They can use it can be used for public infrastructure like sidewalks or moving utilities or adding utilities like water, electricity. It can be used for parks and public spaces. It can be used for parking garages, any sort of green initiatives. So environmental cleanup, anything like that. And it can also be used to cover any associated planning or administration costs. And so I'm going to jump back to Shara, and she's going to talk just about the loan project that has received TIF in Jefferson Street and a little bit more about the next steps.
Thanks, Matt. So as Matt mentioned, the one project we have in Jefferson Street right now is at 1821 Jefferson Street. And you've probably seen this building. It's a 4-story mixed-use development that was built got TIF in 2016. And it was the redevelopment of a vacant distressed building into a mixed-use development. And what we like to hear from you tonight is what our priorities should be for TIF over the next 5 to 10 years. So that when somebody comes to us and says, hey, I have this development I want to do, we can look at our priorities and say, yes, this fits with what we have prioritized for TIF financing, or no, it doesn't fit. And these are just examples. You can provide your own examples for that to let us know where you think, what you think our top priority should be, second priority, so on and so on. And these examples are affordable housing, local and small retail, infrastructure, business incubator, and historic preservation. This is the mentee we're skipping. Those aren't actual ranks. That's just the order I put it in the program. And you can contact me directly. That's my direct line and my direct email address. I can add you to our email list, or you can give me a call if you have further ideas that you would like to discuss about the Jefferson Street redevelopment district, about TIF, about land uses, about anything happening within our redevelopment district. And I'm very responsive, so feel free to contact me.
So you could put those possibilities up there.
Yes.
So those potential TIF priorities, I would just be interested in what they think feel are priorities that we slide it over so that yeah. So I think, and then they can't afford it. Right, I agree with that, and that's what we did, like a survey right after the tornado. We had food distribution in our lot, hundreds of people coming, and we did a survey, and that was the number one issue. That what happened is that when the tornado came, a lot of people were driven out because there was a lot of renters in the area, and when they had to leave, they didn't come back, with the same level of rent. It was a lot higher. So consequentially, there's a lot of gentrification kind of going on, and people can't really afford to live in the city anymore because of the high, and then you got all these corporations coming, Oracle, and and that's driving up the rent and the mortgages even higher. So I would say affordable housing would be important.
So the audience is saying that affordable housing should be one of our top TIF priorities. Just making sure they can do everything.
I would say the local or small retail, because I just talked to a contractor yesterday, and I thought I was coming to this meeting. Because between this Paris building right here on the end, she has the Tribune newspaper. She's not selling anything. She's not going nowhere.
Okay.
She wants to keep her place. And then it's between there and where the where I am, starting there and going down to her, because the hospital is next door. So it's about 4 businesses there. The contractor, we was talking about going, I don't know if they can do it if it was cold, but go, since she's not going to sell and no one else wants to sell, I would sell it. They're not gonna do it. I might sell that. But they was gonna go up in the air and build local small retail business and then apartments above, it's like over the gulch.
Right.
Just leave the businesses below.
Right.
Because they're not gonna, some of them don't want to sell. That's an idea.
We have one person here in the meeting saying local and small retail is important for TIF priorities. And if you're online, you can use the chat feature to give us your feedback on what you think should be a TIF priority. Anybody else?
Can you please elaborate? What is a business incubator?
So a business incubator, are you familiar with the Entrepreneur Center over off of Hermitage? So a business incubator, it provides assistance to people who would like to start businesses. So it teaches them how to go through the incorporation process, how to raise funding, how to market, how to get their businesses up and running. And it provides them the support to do that through what's called technical assistance and also through networking, meeting other entrepreneurs and potential funders. So it helps get them off the ground.
So theoretically, we're thinking if it's on Jefferson Street, it would help Black businesses,
Yes.
right?
And does TSU have a business incubator? I think,
Pardon?
does TSU?
We have, over the years, we've worked with TSU trying to expand and work together to kind of come up with one that would do that to help create jobs in the immediate area, because that's one thing that's missing. As you know, I mean, you're from here, and so places where people can grow their business, start their business, get the mentorship that they need to be able to help guide them. That is one thing that we have heard. We've heard that in conversations with universities as well. And so those are some things that I think that people would like to see to be able to help promote that through. You touched on, and I'm sorry, I'm Joe Kane with MDHA for those I did not meet previously. One of the issues working in this area that we have seen, that I have seen at MDHA, is people holding on to the property and not wanting to sell. MDHA came in a few years ago wanting to build some affordable housing, and we're trying to look for something along this section of the corridor of Jefferson Street, and we're not able to assemble some property. We built the 942 Jefferson Street project. There, those apartments that are right there. And as you mentioned, they got hit by the tornadoes as well. And I mean, we are just now finishing up some of that reconstruction that had happened with it. It was brand new building. So that is one of the problems that I've seen, and the availability of property for development is a bit of a concern. And then you have a lot. I think the nature of Jefferson Street, and you look at it on the property map, a lot of the properties are 50 feet wide, just like they are in the residential neighborhoods. And as you know, so there are, and to this day, there are still some single family houses that were constructed along Jefferson Street. So it had this neighborhood feel, but there weren't those large tracts of land that someone can come in and get and kind of assemble the property as trying to do some type of redevelopment. And that's been one of the slow things. Our use of tax increment financing has to go with private dollars to invest in it. The purpose of tax increment financing, the use that it does, is it helps make the project, put it a bit over the top. And so if it's a marginal project for someone looking at it, and it's like, well, I think I can only get this much rent in it. It's going to cost me this much to build it. And the bank will only loan me this much money on it. We step in through the use of tax increment financing to sit there and say, okay, you need a boost of another 5 to 10% to be able to put this project over the top. And that's where we're able to come in and help. This is our first series of conversations that we are having in the community. And what we wanted to do in this first series is predominantly talk about what we think is needed in the areas. We are going to come back and we're going to start talking about things we can do to help facilitate that with small developers, because that's what I think we're going to see here, because we have smaller tracts of land, and what we can do to help incentivize that along this way. The mayor's office is very interested in working along with it as well, and so we're trying to work together to come up with some ideas and some plans that will go through there. We are also studying ways to be able to generally, as you have seen, some of our projects, they're rather large scale, and tax increment financing has generally been larger dollar amounts to go with a larger scale, because the cost of the tax increment financing it takes a lot to kind of make that deal work. It takes lawyers to understand what's going on, and the bank's trying to figure out what's going on. And there's a cost with that loan that goes in. So there's kind of been a minimum threshold that will work. We are tossing around ideas to amend that, to change that, to be able to bring that cost of accessing those dollars down. So that, so it won't cost you $20,000 to get a loan for $100,000. So something that will get it much more reasonable in there with that. But that's going to be part of our presentations later this spring. I say spring, we're expecting more snow. We got snow also. But that will be something coming up in the spring that we will be talking about a little bit more. But while we are here, we would love to hear any questions that people have.
You get your loan, what's your comparison with SBA loans? I know private investors they can also be a part of the contribution.
Yes, yes, we will follow. We have done projects where there are multiple lenders in place. Our tax increment financing, the part about it is it doesn't require, it's based off of future property tax. So it's not coming out of, there's not really a debt service line that you have. That you sit there and go, well, I got to pay X amount of dollars a month to be able to pay back the TIF loan. It doesn't work that way. You just pay your property taxes. And when you pay your property taxes each year, it happens in the background, the way we MDHA does as the federal government, it happens in the background. You write your check for your property taxes like every property owner does. And then we access those funds and we pay with that. So it's not coming off of your dollars and cents. And it works. It works well, and it has to, and again, it has to go back to the private sector. If we are dealing with some entities that don't pay as much taxes because they're a nonprofit or a church or somewhere that's getting reduced taxes, or they're an affordable housing program that's getting benefit for reduced property taxes, then that can't mirror. But going back to what you said, the SBA and other loans, other types of financing, we'll plug right in there because we're working off of the tax, property tax.
You said that can't mirror what was the word?
If the dollars are getting reduced, there's no dollars coming in. So if you're getting a reduced, if you're paying a reduced amount of property taxes for some reason, or exempt from property taxes, then there's nothing to pay a TIF loan.
So you can't get it? Or
Yeah, you can't, well, you're essentially double dipping. You gave you a deduction on property taxes, so there's no property taxes to pay a loan.
You know, person aid too, if they get a redemption, reduced property tax.
Yeah, now that's generally for the single family owner occupied properties.
So the TIF loan is, we take out a loan and we provide cash to you, for instance, and then we pay the loan back with the new property tax growth.
The increase.
And so if it doesn't generate property taxes, then we have no way to pay the loan.
So a nonprofit could build an affordable housing complex, which would then be charged for tax or not?
Most are, most everybody pays property taxes.
Right.
Do have some other programs that we're working. If you're getting a low income housing tax credit, we have a program where we can reduce your property taxes. And so it'll reduce your operating expenses. And we're seeing a lot of people are looking towards that function because it's reducing overall operating expenses because people are forcing the rent so low there's not enough coming in. On the private sector where you're getting a true commercial building, the property taxes are getting paid with it. And so but that only works with the low income affordable housing portion of it.
So we can kind of do it on affordable housing. We can kind of do it either way. So we can invest upfront with TIF, and that goes in sort of on the, it helps cover some of the upfront construction costs, maybe the purchasing of the land and whatnot. Or what we can do, we can't do both. We can do one or the other. We can do that, or we can reduce the property taxes on the project. And so it depends on the individual if they would like to have reduced operating costs once it's built, or to have a little cash up front. And the math on affordable housing, especially through the main program, the low-income housing tax credit program that funds a lot of the affordable housing development, reduce your property taxes over a period. And so that's what
So is it of what percentage? Oh, so if it's taxes, it doesn't matter about the percentage, not like a loan. You're just paying it back the taxes and they just take it that way.
But again, what we're doing, and I see we got a question about here with the loans, the payment on those. Our typical tax increment financing loan, what we're looking at is a project that I want to make up numbers, but let's say there's a project right now that's paying $5,000 in property taxes. When it's redeveloped, it's going to be paying $55,000 a year in property taxes. So there's going to be an increase of $50,000 a year in property taxes. What's been agreed upon with us and Metro Council and all their budgeting and everything else, we can access up to 75% of that $50,000. So that'd be $37,500 if my math is correct. So we could access $37,500 a year of the new property taxes that are being generated. And with that $37,500, we use that as the loan payment. So if you're borrowing, so you do a backwards, you kind of do what the used cars salesman says is how much can you afford? And then we'll figure out how much can you pay a month, and then we'll figure out what you can do your loan. So we know how much a year we can pay, and we back that in, and we generally will capture those taxes for a period of 15 years and be able to do that. And with today's interest rates down below 5%, you're starting to see a little bit more that you can be able to do with that. The rule of thumb used to be in and around somewhere around 10% of what the total project cost is. So if you're investing $1 million in a new project, there may be $100,000 in tax increment financing that you could access to assist with that. And so that's where we've helped kind of make some of this stuff go. And that's what we're doing. But we got to have someone else come up with the $900,000. And so it's going to take that person. It's going to take, their lenders, and it's going to take some of their equity, and it's going to take finding a piece of property that people can build on to be able to say, all right, here it is, it's coming in. Now I have a gap. I have a gap to be able to make this project work. And we're going to close the gap. Now, if your project works, we're not going to spend it because it's tax money. And so we're not going to spend it if your project works. But if we review it to see what it's doing, we review to see what is the community benefit that we're getting. Is it an incubator space? Is it new small spaces for retail that new businesses can go into? What's the public benefit that we're getting in here? And then we invest into it that way. And that varies depending on where you are. On Jefferson Street, we're going to have one set of things that people need to look at. If we have a redevelopment district on Jefferson Road, you may be looking at another set of priorities that are over there as well. But that's the basis. We're looking to see what the benefit is to the overall general public.
The question on the chat.
In terms of, that's what I was going over, is 15 years.
15 years.
15 years general. Yeah, generally. Years is the way we would look at that.
Once we, the graphs on, let's say we say affordable housing, we rank it number one. I don't know, local small retail, historic preservation, business incubator, really supporting Black business. How soon can these projects get started? What is the timeline? And if someone is already on Jefferson Street, can some of the TIF funds be used to support something that is already existing on Jefferson Street?
There has to be an increase in the property values.
Okay.
So if you had a, if you had 1,000 square foot building on your piece of property, on your piece of property, but you're going to build an additional 10,000 square feet on the back of it, then yes, then there'll be an increase that's going to be taking place, but there has to be an increase. So to answer your question, can you benefit? That's how you benefit, increase. Or if you're 1,000 square foot building, you're like, it's really not worth much, I'll tear it down and build a new 10,000 square foot building, you know, without saving the, you know, with that, or you have a parking lot or whatever it may be, but there has to be that private investment dollars that will generate new taxes. So we got to have that. Essentially the funds are available now, as they have been. And but we, you know, we're trying to get people to come in and try and work with it. And as we have been, we are doing, this process is to go back. Metro Council wants us to go back to the community every 7 to 10 years and say, because these plans are typically for 30 years, they want us to go back every 7 to 10 years and say, okay, have the priorities changed since we introduced this district? And what are these priorities? Because things evolve. You know, if you were sitting on the east bank of Nashville, you would sit there and go, man, our priorities are trying to get anything built here. And now if you're on the east bank of Nashville, you're like, oh my God, we need to slow down because we got Oracle going in, we got all this development going in there, and we don't need to incentivize anything. So those are some of the questions that needs to be looked at, or what has changed. You know, that we had a great grocery store and now a grocery store is gone. We really need a grocery store. So what has changed on the priorities, and you know, and does that fit into our plan? Right now, everything that we see here fits in our plan. We can do all of these priorities. We have, but we like to kind of limit it down to focus. As Metro Council said, just let's focus in and let's make sure we're spending this resource, because it's a limited amount of resource. Metro Council only approved us to have X amount of dollars to spend it. And we can go back and ask for more, but that's the whole process. So let's make sure we're focusing on what it is the community wants.
How do you select the, well, I suppose, so if someone comes in and they're requesting these funds, so do you have a list of developers or like a preferred
Developers? There's not a preferred list. We have an application process that people go through, and they'll fill out the application, and they'll go through there. And one of the things they're saying is what is the public benefit, what their project is, and everything else as we go through the application process. And so it's generally the developer coming to us, or the property owner who has put everything together. Most property owners aren't really developers themselves. And so they have, it may be the buyer, who's the project, or it may be the partner who came in and said, hey, let's work together on this. And they have someone who has the ability to be able to build that. I don't have the ability to build something like that. I would bring in somebody with me.
And then with the application, the process of the application, you have to have a business plan, all of that.
Yes, we're looking at what it is that you're building. And so we're looking at what the project's going to be. Are you going to provide affordable housing? Are you going to provide small places for retail? What is it that you're going to build that's going to come into the area? We're going to be looking at how is that going to perform, because that's part of why do you need our money. So we're looking at your pro forma. Why do you need our money? And so you'll run through it and say, all right, because the way this came out, I only have a debt coverage rate. I can only borrow 60%, and I have 30% equity, and I'm up at 90% to make this deal work. And I need 90% to put it over the top.
I appreciate y'all coming to the area and, find out what we want. But my concern is that I've seen, that we have to have enough people to know about it.
Right.
So so they can start, giving their ideas. Because if they don't if someone don't step in and give you the ideas of what they want, then you all, start developing things that you want, right?
We do not. We do not have a land bank. We do not have 5 acres sitting out that we're getting ready to say, and so we're not out, we're not out soliciting people to come in and develop something.
Right.
So we don't act that way. We are waiting for the private sector to come to us and say, we need the public's help to make this work. And then we are the public in private-public partnerships. I'm sure you've heard that term. And so we're the public side of private-public partnerships to be able to help make these things work, but we've got to have the private investment come through.
Make more people aware of it.
And we do, and that exactly, and that's part of the next phase. There was a tax increment financing study committee. That was a recommendation that came up. We need more people to know that it's available. We need to figure out ways to do it at a lower cost so smaller projects can do it. And we want you, MDHA, to go out and let the community know about it. And so we have a presentation. COVID has just wiped us out on doing these things. And obviously we have a relatively low turnout here tonight with everything that's been going on. And so we're working on all this stuff. We're building this stuff up. We're going to put live videos onto, like the YouTube videos, on our website, so you can click and link in, and we'll have just a presentation on tax increment financing and what it's done. And so that's the ultimate goal, to have all that done by the end of the spring.
We talked about banks too. So when you go to a bank and you get a loan, credit's gonna be, have to be okay.
Yes.
They need to know that, and then, what type of bank's gonna be able to participate. It's like a loan. I know my friend, she was like president of the bank, but she is helping people, but I don't know, like I said, people who are involved in it, they have their credit and everything.
They do. I mean, because you have to be able, you have to get most of it there, most of the way in there. And so there's a, that's why it's slow. This is not upfront money. This is not money there to help you secure other money.
Right.
This is money after that will help sit there and go, when you're balancing the scale, saying, do I make this investment? Do I not make this investment? And it's balancing here back and forth real close. We hope to be the one that'll tip the scale and sit there and say, I can make this work now. It's a gap financing.
With the gap, we say typically 10%.
Well, that's typically all we can cover. So
Top end.
yeah.
Okay.
So if someone comes in, it's got a 25% gap, it's like, we can't close the gap for you. You're going to have to come up with more equity. You're going to have to, find a new lender that may, or get a new investor, get something in there, because there's no way we can help close this gap. And we won't invest in a project that's not feasible. So it has to be demonstrated. We go back to your point of what you submit into us that we're looking at. We're making sure that it's feasible, that the project's going to be a success.
What might be some other typical sources of funding that you all have seen other groups utilize?
The most basic is you have your equity, which in a lot of places is the land. I own the land, and that can be a large source of equity. And we were talking earlier about how much land values are going up. And so that can be your source of equity coming in here. And then you have the conventional banks that are coming in to help with that. And then that you would put that in. Other sources of financing are going to depend on what you're doing. The Small Business Administration, I don't believe, works on sticks and bricks that much on actual construction of loaning you money. And I'm not that familiar with it. I think they're more to help your business operation work. So that wouldn't be something for the structure, because we're looking at that structure and that building, to make that building work more so than your business work. And so there are other grants if you're doing affordable housing THDA has grants or grant applications that other folks can go to. We've seen grant funds come in to be able to help with those things as well, even from the private sector.
There is a question in the chat.
Well, we're building it. The answer is with rebuilding a home, those do work, but especially sometimes now with the way things are going in here. What we have got to get is that simpler version of being able to do the actual loan. So it doesn't cost so much, because that's what prevented us previously from doing that, is if we're coming in and number one, if you're tearing down a structure, you just lost value. Because that structure had some value that was it, may not have much, but it had some. And then you're coming back with some more. So there's some added in there, but there's also some loss they're taking away. It's like, they tell you when you're remodeling the kitchen. Your house had a kitchen. And so that kitchen had some value. When you threw it out, you had to come back with something. So there's, you're not getting 100% return on that cost that you did. So that's the same thing. And that's what we're going to be doing in our next phases is with the tax increment financing, figuring out ways to bring that cost down so that again, it goes into what are you building? Because the maximum gap that we can figure out that we can close is 10%. And so if you're building if you're $500,000 duplex that's going in there, 2 units and it's spending $500,000 that are going in there, the most it could generate is actually going to be less than that, because when I use my rule of thumb, I was basing it on a commercial piece of property. Commercial properties pay a higher tax rate than residential, almost double. A residence pays 25% based off of 25% of their overall value. A commercial property pays 40% of what their value is. And so that's going to adjust that number down significantly. We've looked at it in the past. We haven't looked at it real recently as to what it can work, but the numbers generally had not worked on small residential projects.
You say small, how small is small?
Really, it would, what I used to always say is the magic number was about $1 million investment. A new improvement on it to be able to sit there and say, all right, it can work. Of course, that was back in the days when $1 million was a lot of money. and
the structure that you said, the one that was, what was like the ballpark of that one? Is that public knowledge?
We never did the single family. But I will tell you, when we have done these before, we have done some condominiums.
I'm talking about the Smoothie King.
Oh, that one down in there. Well, that's apartment, so it's at 40%. Because those are apartments, those are not owned.
But it got $1 million in TIF. Are you talking about the?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So it probably would have been about $10 million project.
Oh.
And I don't have those numbers. We do have them, but I don't have them with us on what it was, because we did the whole analysis on it at the time.
And so an example like we talked about earlier about how you own a storefront, and it's a single story, and so going up over it, if you were to say you own multiple of them in a row, and you were going to, I don't know if it would be feasible to physically keep it and go up, or tear them down and build a new thing and go up and have apartments above it.
They would have to make sure things okay with codes first.
Right.
Before they can do that, because and then make sure everybody else will let the whole block, which is about 5 of us, is willing to do that. So
it would be complicated because there's a bunch of different owners.
Yeah, it is.
Which is what he was talking about earlier, which is makes it more difficult when there's a bunch of different people that own little parts, but.
Even if they're willing to do it.
Well, I mean, if you all were to, or if you owned all of it, it would be easier, but you would have some added value by, going vertical.
Or if you created a partnership with your other
Oh, yeah.
property owners, then we're dealing with one entity. When you start dealing with multiple entities, it starts to become problematic, and it would from the code's perspective as well. But if you all got together and decided you wanted to do something, I think my recommendation would be to create some sort of partnership between you that says, I'm coming in at this much level, I'm coming, where everybody's agreeing at what percentage level everybody's in at to make that work, and then work from that point of view. And we see that almost everything. Almost everybody is creating an entity that we're dealing with, and then who's in that entity, some people may have 25% interest, some people may have, 40% interest, some may have 10% interest, depending on that. But that would probably be the best route to be able to go is with an entity. I heard the clock ding. We've been keeping you over here for over an hour. So, I mean, yes.
The land is sitting right now and has nothing on it, and nobody's doing anything. It's just sitting there, it's just like, someone was like, down, it's empty. I mean, what do we do? How do y'all deal with that? And then the property owners, they may not want to sell, but they still want to just leave it there.
Right.
And sit. And
Yeah.
it makes the street look bad.
Yes.
It's not doing it.
We're not going to, I mean, the only way I think you would see the city, any type of governmental entity step in is to sit there and say, all right, the grass has to be mowed, this has to be done. People are dumping on it, you need to clean it up, dumping and stuff like that, from the city's point of view. Sometimes I've seen people bow to peer pressure. Look how ugly this is, and everybody's all of a sudden they're starting to get a lot of, how ugly is this, and nobody's taking care of it, nobody's doing this, and nobody's doing that. And sometimes people bow down to peer pressure and have, kind of cleaned up their property a little bit. It's not necessarily going to force them to invest significant dollars in it, but they may start taking better care of it.
So can codes be brought into?
Codes can, yeah, and the Metro just redid their entire website. For those of us who use it all the time, it's like, oh my God. But I think for the general public, it's gotten a whole lot better to be able to fill in those type of complaints as to what's going on. And they move fairly quickly to come out and do the inspection.
Thank God I had the issue.
Yeah.
But they kept dumping trash on my lot because they kept putting it over there, so I had to pay to clean it up.
Yeah.
I had coached it, they called me and they said, I told my guy, put that trash on my lot.
Yeah.
And they said, well, get you somebody to put it out. Anyway, I had to pay. I was like, I can't believe I got paid, I did have to pay like $1,500.
Yeah.
Clean up stuff.
People doing illegal dumping on private property. Yeah.
I have another question in the chat.
All right, we want to keep this discussion going. Sheriff, if you'll advance your go back to your slide with your contact information on that, so people can continue to send in questions on that, and we'll get back to with everybody on that answers, and bring back up the chat. So I can answer the person's question. I don't know if I can answer their question. We're starting to get it. What we're starting to do is starting specifics in here. And what I would recommend is with these specifics that you reach out to us and talk about it one-on-one. So Matt is my specialist on the tax increment financing with that. And it would be, but if you just send all your questions back into Sheriff, we're all in a very small office and we are talking to each other constantly. So if you would send your questions in to Sheriff on that, we'll work it around and get it answered. Or it may be these things, it's not an email answer, it's a pick up the phone and we're going to call you and have a conversation with you one-on-one with those. So are there any other kind of general questions that we can answer?
You have a question in the back, Joe.
What? Yes.
I write the redevelopment plan. So the actual plans that go into. Well, I didn't write the one for Jefferson Street, but I have written it for Bordeaux and for Casey. Those are the plans that go into effect for 30 years. And that's what we're discussing. 30 years. There's already one on Jefferson Street that started in 2005.
They never said it.
Right, because it goes into effect, council approves it, and once they approve it, it's in effect.
So Sherry is our planner with that to kind of answer your question, and she's been done work on with creating 2 of them, and then as we continue forward with these in these meetings is what her role is with that. Yes.
Okay, the urban development plan for this area, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then we got problems there, quite a bit, the person got quite a bit of problems in this area. How can you assist us in development, make it affordable, profitable, and along with the property? So we got a big lot, we want to put something on. I get access to capital, reasonable interest.
You can email me. We can talk about it. We'll probably have to talk to Matt about it, about the specifics of the financing. Because we need to have more detail about it.
Yeah, that's going to be a longer conversation. That's why I was saying, run these questions through Shara, and then we can talk about these potential scenarios that you're talking about, because I think otherwise we may be here through the weekend because of the potential questions that people will have. We're glad to sit down and answer them. We're glad to meet on, if we want to meet on video, if we want to have phone conversations or whatever, we'd be glad to do that to be able to answer those questions. But I think that's why I was trying to kind of move this on, because I think we're starting to get into a lot of prospective that we're going to need individualized answers, and be glad to answer those. So contact Shara, she's there, and we'll be glad to go on. We are going to post this entire meeting. This whole thing was recorded on Zoom. It'll get posted on there. We'll get a little summary of what went on as well, and post that on I'll post that on our website as well. If we have your information, we will ding you back directly and say, here it is. And so you will know where that information is. So please send us your information.
And when is the next meeting? You say the spring?
Yes, we do not have another one planned right now. We're trying to go through a couple of them here to, like I said, we were working mostly on these priorities, and I think we got a pretty good consensus on the priorities of what is needed in here. And so then the next one, like I said, we'll shift over. It'll be more directed towards the tax increment financing that we drifted into here. So we want to be able to answer those questions. We have one presentation put together, but we're doing this on all the redevelopment districts. We got 2 more redevelopment districts coming up in a couple of weeks that we're going to be working on as well. So we got about 8 of them that we're cycling through, and then we'll start coming back around the others. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate, Pastor. Thank you for allowing us to enter your home here to be able to have this meeting. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anytime. All right. Thank you. You want to, however you ended it.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good evening.